Okay, I'm going to give it one more minute, and then it looks like we got a pretty good quorum, so thanks to all of you for turning up on time. My name is Mike Northcott. I've been working with Innovation Games and Continuo for a number of years now, and this orientation is for the Decision Engine and Budget Allocator for the San Jose Budget Allocator forums that'll be occurring in a couple of weeks here. So thank you for volunteering. And as I say, I'll keep the line open so that if you have questions, please ask them, but also please use the chat function, and that way we can make sure that if we're in the middle of something, we can capture your question. All right, it's 2 minutes past, so I'm going to kick off. And whoops. This is the agenda for the online orientation. This usually takes about 90 minutes and maybe a little longer depending on the kinds of questions that you might have. Hopefully, some or all of you have had a chance to get online with Laura Richardson and at least play or engage in one of the forums as a real-life activity. A little later in the agenda, what we'll be able to do is I'll show you what the facilitator's screen looks like, but there'll also be an opportunity for you guys to go ahead and dial in as players if you haven't already done that. And that'll give you a chance as facilitators to see the view that a facilitator would see in addition to what the experience would be like from a participant's point of view. So the agenda for today is I'm going to give you a quick overview of what is the San Jose Budget Allocator, kind of what are the goals of the program, what are we trying to achieve there. And then I'll go into some detail about the application, the decision engine itself, how it functions, what you can expect using it, and there'll also have a chance to answer questions about that. We'll talk about who you can go to for help if you get stuck at some point. And then finally, if you haven't already done so, the last thing I'll talk about is signing up for a Continuo account so that as facilitators, you'll have a free account valid until the end of March. And that'll give you a chance to familiarize yourself with the application in more detail. But also, you may find that you have places that you actually want to use the decision engine in your work. And so that temporary account at least will give you a chance to, really get familiar with both Innovation Games, the visual games, as well as the decision engine forums themselves. All right. So what is the San Jose Budget Allocator? Every Voice Engaged Foundation, which is Luke Homan's foundation, has been working with the San Jose City Council for the last 5 years on setting its budget. And it's a way of using some of the tools that Luke and the team have developed over the years in terms of accelerating decisions. And those of you who are experienced with this will remember this as Buy a Feature Online. And it's a really good way of getting folks engaged in understanding what the options are, what the relative value of those options are, and then, quickly coming to an agreement and consensus about how to set priorities. And so the same is true with the San Jose. So, you may have used this with product development teams or customers in terms of setting product features and priorities in that sense, but this also scales really, really well in the public domain. And so the foundation has been working with the San Jose City Council and has used this as a way of engaging citizens in a direct dialogue with the council in terms of setting priorities for the city's budget. And, it helps educate residents about the budget challenges, what the offsets are, and also helps to build consensus amongst the residents. And I think one of the interesting things about this is that, over the past 5 years, there's actually been changes in government, but the process of using Decision Engine and these frameworks has continued to move forward. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm from the council, city council itself, as well as, we've learned a tremendous amount as a group about how to scale these kinds of activities to engage as many people as possible. And so Sam Liccardo, who's been in office now for, I think, just over a year or so, wants to try and engage 50,000 people this year, so 50,000 San Jose residents. So it's a very ambitious number, and that's going to be done in a couple of ways. The first way is on February 20th, which is a Saturday. Between 500 and 1,000 people are going to turn up at the Parkside Hall in downtown San Jose. And those will be the in-person facilitated forums that there'll be lots and lots of participants. And it'll be a very active opportunity to engage the citizens directly in a live forum. And in addition to facilitators, there'll be subject matter experts, there'll be council people, and there'll be an opportunity for the politicians, if you will, to directly engage with the public. And then following that, and what this forum is about is the online facilitated forums. And so from the 22nd through the 26th, there's going to be a whole series of these online budget allocator forums that people will come and engage in. And so we'll talk a little bit about how those will get scheduled, how your time will get scheduled, and hopefully you'll be able to engage in one or more of those online forums and really get to use the tools in a positive way. And then there'll also be the opportunity for a further 49,000 or so people to join unfacilitated galas. And so those are kind of the self-facilitated areas where people can come together and make decisions and sort of get to use the game directly, but they'll be unfacilitated. And in addition, this year, they've also been working on an individual app, an app for the iPhone that would allow an individual to kind of go through the process of allocating budget and use that as an automated process as well. So it's very exciting. There's been a lot of development, and the whole platform has been evolving over the years to kind of embrace this new way of working. So, the goals for this year, the city does want to engage a broader number of residents, and of course it doesn't want to increase costs doing that, and so that's why the online forum becomes really compelling for them. The other thing that is different this year, as opposed to kind of a traditional buy a feature game or budget allocator game, they're looking at a zero-based approach to allocating the budget, which means that, people will know how much they spent in a certain area last year, and the citizens will have a chance to increase the funding or decrease the funding depending upon how they see the priorities for the city. And so there's a couple of evolutions that are going through right now with the development team to make sure that the language in the budget allocator forum lines up with that idea of doing a zero-based budget. So I just want to give you a little heads up as facilitators. What I will do is kind of talk through this thing, but you may expect that there will be some last-minute changes as the process gets more mature and the development team is able to align the language to the goals of the city. And then, as I mentioned, there's also a new form of engagement, which is a single-user iPhone forum. So that'll be a great development as well. And I think one of the questions is, who's going to be participating, and it's going to be regular residents, it'll be neighborhood leaders, it'll be youth organization leaders, all the kinds of people that actually make up a big city like San Jose. And the goal of using these forums is to make sure that as broad representation of the populace is brought into the game as possible. And then in the online, as I say, in the in-person games, there'll be facilitators there. In the online games, we'll also have a chance for facilitators to help guide the process and engage people as productively as possible. And, I think one of the things that has come out in past years has been a sense of surprise, I think, for a lot of residents who come and participate, expecting to have kind of an argument almost, it's like a fixed negotiation. But what they actually find is that through their understanding and their growth and understanding about the issues themselves, their ability to talk and then collaborate with other residents, they come to different conclusions. And so it does become a very collaborative and a very productive environment. All right. Now with that, I want to transition now into facilitating a budget allocator session online. And so this will get into some more of the technical work. And one thing you should know, so these slides and the facilitator script and all of the supporting materials will be made available to you. And so those of you who've been receiving messages from Eric will also then receive a packet of information. And what we'll try and do is make sure that this is kept as up to date as possible. So there's a couple of variables which will change over the course of the next few days here. One of those is the absolute content of what we're dealing with. So the city will continue to refine the issues and the areas that they want folks to give feedback on, and then there'll also be that information will then be reflected in the materials that you get. And like I said, as we're looking at a zero-based approach this year, we'll continue to update the facilitator's guide to make sure that it reflects the system's functionality as closely as it can. Now, those of you, who are familiar with Decision Engine will be familiar with this process. If you haven't had a chance to do that, it's actually pretty straightforward. And there's a few steps that you have to go through to get into the forum. And then once you're in the forum, there's a few steps to managing and facilitating once you're in there. And it's actually really pretty straightforward. So the first thing you want to think about before you click start is to arrive 10 minutes early. And as you set up the game and as the game is presented to you, there'll be a lobby, and that lobby is where people will join the game. And as they arrive, you'll be able to greet them. You'll also have a script which will give folks a kind of context for what the goals are and how the forum will work and how to work together. It's also an opportunity for people to familiarize themselves with the interface of the Decision Engine, and that's how to familiarize themselves with the chat function. Because there'll be no audio, there will only be chat as the way of communicating. It sometimes takes a couple of minutes for people to wrap their heads around that. But the lobby is a really good way of preparing folks before they actually get into the forum where the actual work will occur. So arrive 10 minutes early. The attendees will come in. You'll have a lobby strip that you can work through. And then once that is done and you reach the appointed time of the beginning of the session, then you'll click start and the forum itself will begin. Then once you're in the forum, your facilitative skills are going to come to the front. And this is where, you can rely on your experience as facilitators. So if you've never done an online facilitation, it's really not that different. The major differences you'll find, of course, is you don't have your voice to use. You have chat, have to use that as a function. And there isn't a physical presence. So it's kind of hard at times. You won't have any nonverbal cues to pull off. But if you do a few of these, particularly if you can get some practice in ahead of time, you'll begin to understand kind of the way people chat and what they're saying through the chat and use that as cues in terms of helping people either move forward or to encourage others who are being quiet to come forward and be more participative. And as I say, everyone will get a copy of this deck. And we'll make sure that we do keep it up to date. So keep an eye out for that ahead of the 22nd. But as facilitators,
Mike,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, this is Eric.
Hey,
I don't know how many people are this is affecting, but I know Lawrence is having difficulty getting access to audio. I don't know if you have any guidance for him on that.
I don't. You may have to dial in on his cell phone or his house phone. Call in with a call number, maybe. So if his computer's not working, try dialing in directly. I think we've got a bunch of folks who have done both. So.
Okay.
By the way, this is going to be recorded as well. So if you have insomnia, you can always come back and listen to this again as well. So in addition to that, so as I was saying, the role of the facilitator is to focus on process. So you're not going to be expected to know the content in depth, and it's not up to you to kind of drive the discussion in one way or the other. What we're really asking you to do is help keep the conversation moving, and also to make sure we understand why people are making choices in the way that they are. And we'll get into this in a little bit more detail in a second, but really it's about seeking understanding as much as anything else, and that's really what the city is looking for. So, as you go into the forum, there may be empty seats and empty slots. So, the time comes to start. You've got 5 participants, not 8. You'll start the game, and there may be 3 extra slots. So one of the things you're going to be asked to do is remove those empty slots so that the budget allocated to those slots can be reallocated to the active players. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And then, forum will proceed. People will place their bets, if you will, against the things that they feel are most important. The dialogue will ensue between the various forum participants, and then you'll reach a point where it'll come to an end. Now, each of these forums is 60 minutes long, and that's a fixed 60 minutes. So as a facilitator, you really do want to keep an eye on the clock and make sure that as people are progressing, they're making steady progress against the goals of the forum. Because once you hit that 60-minute wall, the game or the forum will actually come to an end. And that's it, really. So it's at a high level pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Again, those of you who've had the opportunity to play a decision engine or participate in a decision engine training with Laura, and they're going on all week, will be familiar, or at least a little more familiar with the player view of the decision engine. On the left-hand side here is the facilitator view, and I'll walk through the details of this in the next slide. But it's a different view. You have more administrative functions, and you have more capabilities, which it would make logical sense for a facilitator. So for facilitators, there are basically four main areas in the interface. The first one is probably the most important, at least at the lobby level, is the chat function. And in the chat function, there's the ability to have group chats as well as the ability to whisper one-on-one to other participants. In the second box here, number 2, that's the lobby text, and that will be pre-populated with some introductory text. But if for any reason you needed to change that or update it, then what you would do is go ahead and you can copy-paste information into that, and that information is then provided to all of the participants as a static view of what that information is. But you as a facilitator have the ability to edit it. That third area on the right there is where the players will come in. So the standard game will have 8 slots. And the way that we're allocating participants this year is going to be an automated process. So folks will be given an opportunity and a time to join a forum. And if there are 50 folks dialing in, they'll all be allocated automatically to facilitated forums first and then on to galas as a secondary fallback. And that means really as a facilitator, once your 8 slots fill up, you're ready to go. You don't have to wait longer and expect more people to come in. And the other thing is that if you only have 5 players turn up, we're having a no-drop rule. So, don't wait a prolonged length of time for more people to turn up. If you don't have a full 8 participants, it's okay to go ahead. And we just want to sort of make sure that people have an opportunity to have their voice heard as part of the budgeting process. And then for the standard platform, box 4 is a waiting area. So if for any reason you were to have a group that's larger than 8, then you could have people in the waiting area. As a facilitator, you do have the ability to add more slots, and then you could drag folks from the waiting area into those slots. But again, as I expect what's going to happen with these forums with the San Jose folks is that a lot of that will be automated, and so you're not going to have to worry about some of those details. And then this view is just, again, you'll have these slides so you can refer to this. This is just a quick reference, and it basically is just saying what I just told you. So the white box in the bottom left here, that's the chat that everyone sees. Right next to it with the blue bar on top is the whisper area, the text, the bottom right there is where you would add a participant slot if you needed to do that. And then across the top here, you've got a URL that you can go ahead and copy. So if for any reason you needed to text the information or send a message to someone, then you can do that, and it's very quick and easy to do that. You can also lock the game. That's what that padlock is there for. And then finally, that little button right next to the padlock is where you would start the game. Also, for forums that are held outside of the San Jose budget area, there's the ability to eject folks right up front. So usually you're doing this with a group or a company, but if somebody's name turned up who was not supposed to be there, you actually have the ability as a facilitator to drop that person immediately, even before you get into the forum itself. which is always nice to know. It gives you a little bit of authority and power. And so, as I say, each forum will be scheduled at a time that's convenient for you. Eric is going to send out information about this, and that will be available next week. And there will be a poll which says, look, I'm available at these times, and you'll get signed up. And then as those forums go live, then you'll go ahead and run those forums yourself. Each forum, as I say, lasts 60 minutes, and that's from the time that you hit the play button until the time the forum ends is a 60-minute length of time. But you, as a facilitator, want to plan on about a 90-minute window. So, if you really want to get ambitious and do several in a day, that's entirely up to you. But don't schedule them, 1 hour back to back, because you just frankly won't have enough time to, be in the lobby early and also cover any chat that may happen right at the end of the game as well. And as I said, your participants will be added to the forum dynamically. They'll be taken care of by the system itself. But if for any reason you have less than 8 players, don't worry. Go ahead, start your forum, and we just want to make sure as many people get the chance to participate as possible. And then, just as a quick zoom in, because that button is kind of small, but that's the lobby, and this is where you would start the forum. So you click that button, and then immediately you go to this next set of screens. So if you've been a player in the past, you'll have seen these, but every player who's new to the forums will see a series of screens that kind of walks them through the basic functionality and kind of is a nice way of explaining how the system works so that they can come up to speed a little bit more quickly. And this has proven really effective. When this was added, I think it was about 18 months, 2 years ago, it really was a way of jump-starting the whole discussion, because people really sort of said, oh, okay, it's not that complicated, and they understood which buttons to push and why they were pushing them. The thing to remember as a facilitator is that there's always a pause at this point, because as people walk through the screens, the chat goes quiet because they're having to click through before they can actually get back to the live board. So you just have to sort of give them a minute or so and then go ahead and check in and make sure that folks have gotten through this speed bump towards being productive. And then this view would be the view of the forum structure itself. So as you're inside the decision engine, you have another 4 areas. The number 1 on the left, of course, is a chat area, and that is just the same as it is in the lobby, and that's where folks will go ahead and the chat will be captured. The section 2 is where the players are, and so that's across the top now. Each individual will have their name at the far left column, and then they will be able to see all the other players as they come in to their right and see how much budget folks have, how much they bid, and how much is remaining. And then that way, everybody can kind of keep an eye on each other. But it's also a way of giving transparency and promoting conversation, so that one player can chat to another and say, oh, you've got $1 million left. Why don't you help me increase the budget on this, or something like that. And then 3 is the bidding area. This is where the work goes on, and so folks take their money and spend it down there. And then finally, if there are more than 22 items on the list, people can scroll down. So they'll be able to scroll up and down in the board here and make sure that they can see all the items. So you just want to make sure that as folks come in, they have a chance to familiarize themselves and then begin to understand the items a little better. So with that, then we have this view, which is, again, a reference view for the forum itself, and it just is highlighted what I just mentioned here. You also have the ID available for easy sharing. And, as I mentioned in this example, so here we have 4 players, and then we have some empty slots. So these empty slots, we want to eliminate those because the budget allocated to those empty slots wouldn't get used otherwise. You as a facilitator have no ability to bid or change bids. So this money here needs to get reallocated to these other players so that they're playing with a full deck, if you will. And that's just simply clicking on that little X that you see up there, and that will close that slot out and automatically reallocate the funds. When folks first come in, you can encourage them to familiarize themselves with the various items that are on the list, and there's two ways of doing that. One is they can simply hover over the text of that item title, if you will, and that will bring up this pop-up blue dialog. And so there's a lot of detail in there, there's a lot of information in there. The other way that they can get the same information is by going up to the tab called Items at the top of the board here. And when you click on items, you get the same information, but it's in more of a linear format. So they can actually sort of scroll through this fairly quickly. And so those details are always available. They can get them at any time. But it's a good idea to get people to, go through this process, read through it before they actually start their bidding. And that way, they'll have a better sense of what they are working on. And then throughout the game, the pop-ups can be used for quick and easy reference. Now, since this is a zero-based exercise, the participants have three options. They can increase spending from last year, they can spend the same amount, or they can decrease spending. And your job as a facilitator is not to recommend or tell them what to do. Your job as a facilitator, of course, is to understand the choices that folks are making. And as the dialogue goes on, you'll either see things staying the same or increasing or decreasing. And as that occurs, that's an opportunity to say, okay, tell us more about that. Help us understand why is it you want to shift money from one area to the next. And in the past, there has been a line item called contingency reserve, and it's not 100% sure yet whether or not the contingency reserve will be on the list this year. But if it is, this is what a contingency reserve is, and there's a standard answer to that question. But the citizens may decide to increase funding, they may decide to decrease funding, or do nothing. They can also choose not to bid. So they can abstain from actually moving money onto the board. And what that means is that they're either saying, I don't want to change anything, or I want to spend less money, i.e. I want a tax cut, or they have potentially a third choice, which is this contingency reserve, which is to say, okay, I'm going to take this money, and because I don't want to place it on any of the items on the board, I'm going to put it away for a rainy day. And essentially the contingency reserve in San Jose's terminology is a rainy day fund that is then managed by the city council. And there's a stock answer for that. And this will be part of your facilitator's guide. So if the question comes up, you can go ahead and copy paste this in. And there's a couple of situations where dialog boxes will come up, and that's when somebody is out of funds, and so they'll get a warning like you don't have any money, you can't spend that much. The important thing to remember is that players can change their bids at any time, so they can move funding from one area to the next, and so it's not a static thing. So once you've placed your first bid on an item, that item can always be changed, and they can always take that money and move it to a different item if they want to later. And then similarly, there will be overbids. In this case, for example, the contingency fund. So people can't figure out what to bid on, so they put a lot of money into the contingency fund, and that's where you would get an overbid, and that's perfectly legitimate, and that's okay. In other areas and other items, the folks may overbid for a couple of different reasons, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But as we're talking about bidding and chatting, and your role as a facilitator, one of the things we want you to try and do is capture intentions. So, for example, Henry solo purchases an initiative. So there may be an item on the board, and Henry takes all of his money and decides he's going to spend all of that money on that one line item. And you, as a facilitator, really want to find out why he did that. And you can chat to him, say, I see you funded that initiative. Why is this so important to you? And you want to remember that all of the chat is captured. And as a facilitator, you can see all of the group chat. You can also see all of the whispers and the one-on-one chats. And part of your script is to let people know that. But what's important about that is that the chat really does capture a lot of the richness in the conversations, but also really is our way of being able to go back and understand, the choices that people make and why they make them. And then that information is captured and is relayed back to the city as part of the decision-making process. So, you really do want to use your chat function as much as possible and encourage others to use the chat function so that we can capture that thinking process. Another example might be Sally spends half her money on an initiative. You could encourage Sally to go and get other residents to join her in funding that particular initiative. So she may not have enough funding to purchase it, but it might be important to her. And so you can encourage her to engage with others and get them to fund it as well. Now, as I was mentioning before, so we're in a zero-based budgeting format here. And so during this particular structure of this forum is, participants can go ahead and apply less than the amount of the budget that was spent for the last budget cycle. So in other words, a line item can have a reduction in the budget amount for this next year. And so that reduction or underbidding is a sign of three things. So the residents explicitly want to have less money, so they don't see the value. They want to take the money and spend it on another program. That's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. They may feel that too much money was spent regardless of other programs, and so they just don't find it value in that format, in that particular line item at all. Or they simply made a mistake and they didn't mean to do that. And your job as a facilitator is to find out which one of these three choices it was. Did they explicitly want to spend less money on this item? Do they really feel like there was too much money spent for any particular reason? Or did they simply make a mistake and capture that as part of the chat? And then the other question would be the opposite of that, which is overbidding. So people may apply overbids, and I was talking about this just a second ago, but they may explicitly want to allocate more money to an initiative because it's important to them, they feel it's important to the community, and away they go. They want to put a lot more money into that particular area. The other option is they may simply also have made a mistake. And quite often you'll see overbidding when there's an item that there's a lot of chat about. People are very excited about it. So they decide that, amongst two or three of them, they want to go ahead and purchase that, quote unquote, purchase that item, and you'll get two or three people putting a lot of money into it, and then you'll get an overbid, which is sort of unintentional. And, it takes a few seconds, but typically that levels itself out. As a facilitator, the question is, do you want to do one-on-one chats with participants or do you want to do group chat? And my general advice with this is it's very much like a in-person forum. You want to try and bring the sidebars into the group as much as possible. So often you'll see a couple of people having a sidebar discussion, and it's your opportunity as a facilitator to say, hey guys, this is a really interesting discussion. Why don't you bring it back to the group? And that way, they can engage with your thought process too. If you're trying to perform a corrective action, well, that may be at some point where you're grabbing somebody virtually by the collar and suggesting that they stop being abusive, or why don't you slow down and let somebody else chat? Or you're encouraging somebody who's not bidding and has gone quiet and ask them, I see you're not bidding. Is there something that you're confused about? And just make sure that they're not stuck, or they may have just gone and done email or something. And sometimes you'll see that will happen. People stand back for a minute. Some people will wait until the last minute to place their bets because they want to see where everybody else is putting their money. And so that's a couple of different applications of one-on-one chatting as a facilitator. So when it comes time and the clock is running down, you'll eventually want to end the forum. And again, the end forum button is there at the top of the playing board here. And when you click that button, it'll ask you, really, do you want to end it? And what you'll do is you say, yes, I want to end forum, and confirm that. And then you'll have another dialog box that'll pop up, and that will give you two choices. And one is to exit the forum, which means the whole thing shuts down, or you can continue to chat. And it's generally good practice. We encourage you to continue to chat for a few minutes once the game is finished and you want to close it down. And what that allows you to do is, any residual commentary that's going on between the participants can be completed. It also gives you a chance as facilitator to thank everybody for their participation and then sort of exit gracefully. But all of that chat is continually captured and becomes part of the final documentation for the forum. Question about pace and time. Again, you're going to be in a virtual setting. You're only going to have the chat. You're not going to have the ability to kind of feel the energy in the room like you do in a physical forum. So you'll want to sort of keep an eye on how well is the bidding going? How well is the chat moving along? Are people talking to each other? Is there activity on the board? And are people purchasing items? Do they understand what's going on? And for example, if you haven't seen a bid in the first 15 minutes, then you want to encourage people to get out there. It's pretty rare. Usually I find that the games kind of split themselves into thirds. So the first 15 minutes or so is about getting oriented, figuring out how the interface works and what's expected. The next 20 minutes tend to be really active. People start chatting and start to move things around. And then really the last 20 minutes about refinement and coming to an agreement that as a group, this is what we think are the most important things, and here are the priorities as a group for the city to understand. And so, when you get towards, say, 10 minutes left in the forum or maybe 15 minutes left, you want to encourage people and say, look, we've got 10 minutes left. Think about finalizing your bids. Think about if there are any changes you want to make. This would be a good time to do that. And sometimes introducing a sense of urgency and a sense of lack of time is a good way to get activity keyed up. And so sometimes I'll sort of get a real sense of urgency if I think people are kind of not really making firm decisions and say, okay, guys, you've only got 5 minutes left. And that 5 minutes is really a flexible 5 minutes, because at that point, people often get really focused and start to really drive towards some conclusions. But really, remember, it is a fixed time frame. So, when you're truly within the 10-minute window, you want to let people know that you are going to close it down and it will end. And then finally, once you do end the forum, keep the chat open and thank people and as good practice. One of the things you do have as a facilitator is the unique ability to talk to the system. And there are a series of commands that are available to you as a facilitator of a decision engine. We're really only going to focus on 3 of them as far as the San Jose forums are concerned. But the way that you get the system commands is you whisper to the system player in your whisper dialog box there. And so that blue bar that you see, you'll see all of the players that you can whisper to one-on-one, but there's also a player for facilitators only called system. And that is where you would go and provide your commands. And so there's a series of commands. The ones that we care about as far as the forums are concerned are really about helping control bad behavior if you come across it. And we'll say this, that I've never had somebody be completely out of control and obnoxious or being rude and abusive in my experience using the game. I think Luke said in all of the times that he's played Decision Engine or used Decision Engine in different forums, he's had to eject one person for bad behavior. So you're not going to find this. It's going to be very, very rare. But you do have the opportunity to either stop a player from bidding if they're just getting in people's way and won't stop. You want to chat to them, ask them to play nice. If they're not going to play nice, you do have the ability to stop them bidding. You can also stop them bidding and chatting. And eventually, if they won't do either of those things, then you can drop them altogether. And what will happen at that point, if you drop a player, is that their bids will stay on the board, but any money that they had left over in their budget will be reallocated back to the other players. So they won't have the ability to bid or chat, and their funds get reallocated to the other player. So that's the main difference there. And what you would do to initiate the system commands is that you whisper to the system and you would say, stop bid, and then the player's name, or stop and the player's name. And then the system will give you a confirming dialog box and let you know what happened. And as I say, don't expect you to use this. This is actually something that is worth practicing. So get signed up for your pro account, get into the decision engine, and figure out a way of having some practice and just get used to these system commands. This will also be in your facilitator's handout. So although you could whisper a command to the system and get this as a reference, you'll have it in the facilitator's guidebook so that you can copy paste if you need to. A couple of tips. If you, as you're going through this, if you haven't done a lot of these, just sort of getting used to the rhythm and pace of these things can take a little bit of time. But once you kind of get into it, it's actually pretty straightforward. And as I say, your lobby script and your game script will be made available to you, and that will allow you to go ahead and copy paste from that standard document and use that as a way of saving a lot of time. Good idea to get your keyboard shortcuts. So if you know Control-C, copy in Windows, or Command-C if you're on a Mac, that's very helpful. And then is Control or Command-V to paste if you're on a Windows or Mac machine. And just sort of practice that a little bit. What I like to do, if you're lucky enough to have two monitors or you have a really big monitor, it's a good thing to be able to put the web interface, the decision engine on one side and your facilitator script on the other, and that way they can coexist side by side. You can just go back and forth and do the copy paste as you move through the forum. And it's a real lifesaver, and it's very helpful. The other thing is, if you're going to be doing a number of these, it's sometimes helpful to just go through the script, and once you're familiar with it, and once you're familiar with how the forums are progressing with the residents, you may modify the script to be more of your voice and make it easier for you to actually access the key areas that are most important to the participants in the forums themselves. Another thing is that you're all skilled facilitators, so you've all had experience at facilitating something in the past. So trust your instincts. You've got a lot of practice in other areas. All of the skills that you've developed over the years are going to be applicable in these forums. And yes, we all facilitate differently, but that's okay. I mean, that's a good thing. And be sure to review your facilitator's guide, particularly as we're coming up to the last week here. Any changes, as I said earlier, any changes made by the council, city council itself, will be incorporated in that, and we'll do our absolute best to make this as easy for you as possible. Similarly, with the lobby, it's get people oriented, get them chatting, get them responding to you so that they understand the chat is the primary form of communication. And this is where your lobby script can be a big help. Whispers, again, remind folks that if they're whispering to each other, you can see all that stuff. And so it's semi-private. It's not completely private. And also that information, all of the whispers, all of the chat does go back as part of the analysis. The other thing is that it's good to tell the group that all the issues or items purchased by the group is a group purchase. So it's a group decision, and you're looking for as much collaboration and consensus as possible, so that people will walk away from the experience saying, "Yeah, okay, that was as good a result as we could get given the forum and given the context." And finally, you as a facilitator is to encourage people to get involved and to understand, their thinking, their choices, why they chose to do a certain thing. And, it's not to criticize or judge, it's just purely to understand. And you're focused on process and not content. A question that comes up fairly frequently is, well, what if they ask a very technical question? What do I say at that point? And we have some FAQs, which I'll get onto just after this particular slide. Most useful thing you can do between now and the time the forum starts is to get some practice. So get your account online and go ahead and get as much practice and familiarity with the interface as you can. And so that way, things that arise, you'll be familiar with. And I think Eric, Laura's got some more forums coming up, some more practice forums, so that folks can at least see it from a player's perspective too. I mentioned Q&As, and so here are some pretty typical questions that people may ask. So, for example, a resident wants to add an initiative to a list. Well, that's what you want to do at that point is encourage them to write out what do you think your initiative, so that we can take your chat and make sure that we get that back to the San Jose City Council, and encourage people to use the chat function in a way of making a proposal, if you will. Mentioned about bad language. People are using offensive language. They're being rude or just being difficult. You do have the ability to drop them if you have to. Since you're a process facilitator, not a content expert, the question does come up, if I'm need a subject matter expert, will there be subject matter experts available? And the answer is really no. So you're going to have to encourage people to use the information that they're being given and use the information on the board. In the past, when we've done this with civics folks or school boards or school districts and stuff, my experience has been that the residents actually are pretty familiar with a lot of this stuff. Remember that people are opting into this process, and so they're going to be a little more savvy, a little bit more involved in any case. And very often the technical questions can get answered by the group. And it's perfectly fine to say, that's a really interesting technical question. We don't have access to a subject matter expert. Does anybody else in the forum know an answer for that? And do it that way. And if it's something that nobody can answer, just ask them to chat it out and type it out so that that question can either be addressed later, or they can go ahead and take it to their council member directly. And again, similarly with somebody wanting more details, encourage them to contact their council member. Just don't get sort of sucked into a long conversation about a subject that is, something either you know nothing about and have no abilities to address, because of course the forum's going to continue in any case, and you want to keep an eye on the broader context. And so what if you need help? Well, there's a list of folks, and I'm Mike, so I'm number 2 on the list. That's my email. And Luke's available, Laura's available, Eric's available, Tammy's available. So these are all folks that, if you get into the forums themselves and you're practicing and some corner case question comes up or something that we haven't covered in the material otherwise, just shoot one of us an email and we'll be happy to answer that question. But again, continue to keep an eye out for updates to the materials ahead of the 22nd, and that will hopefully answer a lot of your questions. And do spend a little bit of time familiarizing yourself with your facilitator's script and then practicing that copy-paste. So questions. So Eric, do we have questions that we want to do? So what I'm about to do is transition to kind of a live demo. And those of you who are in sales know the first rule of sales is never demo, but we're going to do it anyway. But Eric, do we have questions? Can you engage?
Sorry, Mike, I was on mute. Yes. So just in terms of the system itself, there's no need to there was a question around, do they need to capture the logs and send them out?
Right.
The system itself should be capturing all of the information in terms of the results of the facilitated forums, as well as all the chat logs and et cetera. So there wouldn't be any, as far as I understand, there's no need for any of the online facilitators to do any post-event processing whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. So all of that should be taken care of for you. So yeah, you don't have to download and gather that information or send it somewhere. That'll all be taken care of at the back end.
We've got a few other questions here. Can you engage in Whisper with more than one participant?
No.
So it's a one-on-one offline chat, if you will.
Yeah. So if you have 2 people that you're trying to address, you have to send each of them a Whisper. Or you could do a group chat saying, stop talking amongst yourselves and get back into the group. But
so if another question was, what happens if a participant leaves early? I think what happens is the money will be redistributed to the rest of the participants.
Yeah, and that would be a legitimate way of dropping somebody. So, for example, if somebody says to you, I got to run, and you say, okay, great, I will drop you, which means that they'll be shut out of the game, but their money would get redistributed.
Any remaining money that they hadn't yet applied to any particular service or line item that the city provides.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see here. I am scanning. It's great. Okay. I don't see any other.
So Lisa had a question, which was, if we have a system problem during, I'm assuming you mean, Lisa, during the game or during the forum itself, who can we go to for technical help? If it's really a kind of a showstopper, you may just have to abandon the forum and start again. But Tammy and others will be available online for any sort of major technical glitches. And we don't necessarily expect any of those. But if you were to have something that's a showstopper.
I think that's a good question, and we'll include that in our kind of guidance with the facilitators when we send out the information of how each of the facilitators can sign up. Is there an escalation path in case there's a system problem? So it's a great question, and we'll make sure that we get an answer for that.
Yep. And if another question is about who would we share the forum URL for the San Jose budget allocator forums. It's not going to be necessary because that will all be taken care of by Eric and the rest of the folks in Centennial. So there's going to be one URL, and the residents will get that, and then the system will automatically and dynamically allocate people to different forums.
Eric, so the URLs that there will be. My understanding, and I'm not the technical designer of the system itself, they're normally with a facilitated event, you set up a forum and you get a unique forum ID associated with that particular event that you've set up.
Right.
And you run it, and afterwards then you can look at the details and look at the results. In this case, one forum URL will be created for all of the facilitators to join. And underneath that URL will be a bunch of other forums that are scheduled. And the way the system is going to be designed is that list of other URLs you won't see. You won't see those forum IDs. They're kind of hidden. The residents won't see that either. They'll join through a link. And as Mike mentioned, a forum ID will be created by the system when residents join. Residents join, facilitator hits their URL, they get matched behind the scenes, and you just run the form. When you join it, the residents will pop in, and when you're done, you close that forum ID. It'll look like that forum ID is closed, but in reality, you could join another forum and run another event after that. Sorry for the background phone call there.
Okay.
That's a brief explanation.
Hey, Eric, this is Keith Matthews.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I just wanted to ask you something. The confab, there's 2 days, 18th and 19th. On the 18th, there's training, and the 19th, it's the confab. And there was some talk about having to attend a course or a class on the 18th in person. What is that, and what are we covering in that class that's not being covered here on the online forum today?
So the collaboration confab has several classes that are scheduled that day. There's the master facilitation workshop, there's the civic engagement event, and they're in parallel tracks. So depending on which track, the civic engagement class will cover this, but it also covers what's called Common Ground for Action, which is a platform that's jointly produced by Kettering and Centennial. And that's an additional aspect that is beyond the online or in-person training that we're doing at Centennial. We're not covering Common Ground for Action. Also, that civic engagement class, it will cover what's going to be happening in person on February 20th. So if you're signed up to do an in-person facilitation, the civic engagement aspect is key in order to be prepared for the Saturday session. But it also covers the Common Ground for Action, which is actually a very, very interesting and slick UI, as well as a great application for engagement at scale.
So if we sign up for the facilitator masterclass, I'm just wondering, is it mandatory that we do the civic engagement to be able to do the in-person thing on Saturday the 20th?
I think if you're doing the master facilitation, we'll figure something out.
Okay.
We'll figure something out because you're going to have the facilitation techniques down, and if you're doing it in person, that's the biggest thing. I think just getting a little bit of kind of orientation around what is exactly going to be covered on February 20th with the residents. Perhaps, come a little bit earlier on Saturday just to, do a little bit of homework, and then I think you'd be ready to go. We have a program meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 9 o'clock internally within Centennial to go through some of these final details. But these questions are great because, it helps everybody to understand what to expect going forward.
Thanks, Eric. I didn't mean to derail this conversation, but I just wanted to get that cleared up.
No, good question.
No. Others may have the same question, so that's great. Thank you, Keith.
Okay.
Hi, it's Nancy Mara here. So I was wondering if the Common Grounds for Action is also can be used for strategy outside of kind of the civic. So is that going to be covered in any of the other workshops, or if you're interested in just that whole new strategy engine UI, that would be the course that you might look at?
So actually, strategy engine, I'm getting an echo and it's really, okay, I'm going to plug through this. Anyway, strategy engine and Common Ground for Action are exactly the same engine behind. It's just a different skin on the front end. So covering Common Ground for Action is basically strategy engine. Mike, do you have any other comments around that?
No. One is internal to Kettering Foundation. The other one is the external version. But
did I answer your question?
Thanks for the clarification, because I just thought other people might be interested in knowing that it actually can be used internally and externally.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, I'm going to take a few minutes and just kind of walk you guys as much as possible through what the facilitator's view look like. So I'm sharing, I think, my main screen at this point, and I've got it set up. So I've got a forum on the left-hand side, my script on the right-hand side, and I'm going to send out into the chat dialogue here a link to this forum. So I can take, I don't know how many people I can take. I know I can take about 10 or 12, and I'm not sure we can get everybody in here at this point, but at least you can have a good understanding of what it would be to be a facilitator. So for those of you who go ahead and want to click on that, then you can join this forum as a participant.
Hey, Mike, this is Eric. Unfortunately, I am going to have to drop.
Sure.
So, yeah. Any other questions, please feel free to email me following the training here, and Mike will be collecting who attended, and will be able to send me the list of attendees.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Okay, bye-bye.
I just pinged, but it's asking me for a password.
Yeah, so if you have an account already, put a password in it. If not, you should be able to just sign in with your email. So if you already have an account, it will ask for your Centennial account or your Innovation Games account. So as you can see, folks are coming in, they're being automatically added, and they're getting slotted in there. And as you can see, is what I'm doing is just copying and pasting while that's happening. So you can see here now that we've got our first 8 slots filled. So if anybody else wants to dial in, they should then get onto the wait list here. So there's Jim. So for those of you watching on the screen here, Jim is now in the wait list area. So what I'm going to do is go down here, and Gez is as well. So I'll add a participant slot. So I'm going to add a couple of slots. And as a facilitator, what I can do is grab Jim and then slot him in here. So Jim's now part of the participant list, and that's all there is to it. So if you're running this as part of your consulting effort, or you're running a decision engine for somebody else, and you're not sure how many people are going to turn up, and the message goes out to 15, and you're expecting 8, but 10 turn up, this is how you would manage that. And so then I would continue to chat to folks, and we kind of walk through this. I'm not going to go through this entire script, but as you have about 10 minutes or so, you will want to go through this so that people have an understanding of what to expect. And then eventually we get down to the point of talking about how the chat works. And so this is kind of where this comes in, and you can tell people that, yeah, you can publicly chat with other players, and this is what you want them to do. So you want to encourage people to start to try it out. Now, I think most of you are pretty familiar with this, so you've started chatting, and tell them what your job is. And what I like to do is make sure that everybody says, are you ready to go? And remind folks I can see all the whispers. And then I always ask people that if you're ready to chat, go ahead and chat. Again, if you're trying to get in and you get asked for a password, it's because you have an account, so you want to enter in your Innovation Games or Continue account password. And so generally, as a good practice, I try to get people to say, okay, chat ready. And so we should have lots of people saying ready. And that means that A, people are paying attention, and B, they've kind of figured out that chat's the way we do it. Cool. And so now that we're ready, this is where we go ahead, and the start button up here top right is where you would start the forum. And remember, once you click start forum, that's when the counter starts going. So that's when your 60 minutes begins. Now, for those of you who haven't done this before, what you should see is a series of screens, and you'll click through those. And then we would start the copy paste effort again. And then this is where you would ask folks to start to begin to look at the various items. And this is where, if you just float your mouse over, you can see each of the items there. As I say, when you can often encourage people to click on the Items tab, and then this is just often a quicker way of reviewing the content. It's quite likely that the content could be fairly dense this year. It's obviously a lot of pretty complicated stuff, and therefore there may be quite a lot of content. And I know Luke is spending a lot of time with the city to make sure that is as succinct as possible, so people don't spend a whole lot of time trying to just simply understand what the items are. And so we have our first bid, and so I'd say okay, so there's a dialog box. So I'm going to check with Homeless Response Team. Okay, if you're on watching my screen share, I'm going to go ahead and eliminate this empty slot here and just click on that. It says, do I want to remove participant? I say yes, and then everybody gets a bonus. Usually I will eliminate the slots within the first few minutes, mainly because as people join late, then they're kind of behind the learning curve, and it can get pretty disruptive if you're not careful. Then, as I mentioned, there are some chat suggestions here. So you've got, for example, somebody who hasn't did much. You could ask questions directly. And this is often where you can modify the facilitator's guide to be something that's even more useful for your purposes. Great. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of a chance to see the facilitator's view, and then of course as players you got to see what that was like as an experience if you haven't done that in the past. But that's effectively it. So you'll have your script, and you'll just be able to use that going back and forth. And then it's just a question of keeping an eye on the dialogue as people are moving forward to see how it goes. And don't forget, as you're looking at the chat, sort of scrolling up, you can always scroll up and down. So if you've been off having to do a little admin on or adjust something, you can always go back and make sure you can pick up from where the players have left off. So with our discussion, there's a couple of things. There is a link in this documentation about where to sign in or sign up. And then there's some reference tools. As I mentioned, and Eric mentioned, we'll be sending that material out. And also, there are other videos that are available, like the Decision Engine Overview, just as an explanation of what that is. Now, are there any other questions about the main bulk of this? If you have an account and you're signed up, you're familiar with a lot of this stuff. If you don't have an account, that's what I'm going to talk about next. So, if you're welcome to drop off if you've already have an account, or you're welcome to sit in and understand how this next little section is going to go. But I wanted to make sure if you are going to leave, if you had any other questions, to either ask them now, or by all means send me or one of the other team members an email, and we'll talk about that. And hopefully a lot of you will be at the confab next week. I will certainly be there, and I will look forward to seeing all of you in person if you are going to be there. Okay, great. So to set up an account for the purposes of San Jose Budget Games, there's just a quick series of slides here. There's also a video that has a link here that Laura set up. But basically, you want to go to innovationgames.com, and then on the far right-hand side, where it says Join, Sign In, click the Sign Up button right there. And what that will do is take you into a screen that looks something like this. And what you want to sign up for is a professional account. And this will give you a coupon code, and you can enter that coupon code, and that will be valid until the end of March 2016. And that will be valid not only for this decision engine, but also for the visual idea engine as well, the visual games engine, which has just been recently updated. And so you'll have access to all of that capability. And what you'll do is go ahead and fill this information in. You will have to enter your credit card information, but as long as you enter the coupon code SJC 2016, you will not be charged. And so be sure to take a note of that if you haven't set up your account. It's SJC 2016. Enter that coupon code at the bottom of this dialog box and place the order, and your credit card will not be charged, and it will go against that coupon code. And then you'll get a dialog box that looks something like this. And if you have questions, or if you've already set up an account, please don't do it again. It confuses the system. You will just go ahead and use your existing account. But if you've never had an account or need to set one up, this is quite simply how you would go ahead and do it. And if there are any issues, then by all means give Tammy Carter at the Continuo office a call.